You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The most ideal scenario for Syracuse football and their offensive line for next season is that everyone returns that can possibly return. And that means John Ray Reed, Jakob Bradford, and Mark Petry. So, in this scenario, Syracuse football does not have to address offensive line anymore. They are done. And that's a good thing because this offensive line was pretty good this past season. It gives Syracuse not only a pretty good offensive line, but it gives them continuity with their two guards and their center. Your left tackle is going to be one of probably David Woolaba or Demetrius Weatherspoon. I'm leaning towards Woolaba because I think he's better than Weatherspoon. And your right tackle, instead of Savion Washington, will likely be N'Keal Betrand from Alabama, who they got in the portal. So it's essentially the same offensive line they just had. But instead of Savion Washington, you have N'Keal Betrand. And I think overall, we can expect similar results because it's a similar offensive line from this year. Now let's say John Ray Reed returns, but for whatever reason, the guards don't, whether it's due to not actually gaining an extra year of eligibility or the fact that they just simply don't want to return to Syracuse. They decide to enter the portal in the spring and they go elsewhere because it could happen, right? In this scenario, obviously, you still have your starting center in John Ray Reed, but you would need to figure out the guards in the portal. Perhaps there's a redshirt freshman or two that can step up and fill those guard positions. But my bet is that one of the tackles would slide in to play guard. One of those three tackles are David Woolaba, Demetrius Weatherspoon, and N'Keal Betrand, who they just got from Alabama. I think if both guards leave, one of them is going to slide to guard. Even if one of them, let's say, return, you still have that other guard that's open, and I think one of those three tackles is going to be playing guard next season for Syracuse football. Now let's say both guards do return, okay? So Mark Petry and Jakob Bradford, but John Ray Reed, who announced that he's coming back to college but didn't say Syracuse, decides to enter the portal in the spring and go elsewhere. Well, then Syracuse is in a little bit of a pickle because you would need a starting center, and it's not as easy as, well, let's just promote whoever the backup was this past year because the backup, Josh Ailoa, is out of eligibility. So you're probably going portaling if you're Syracuse football. You are looking for a center. I'm not sure if there's anyone in-house that they would be comfortable with being the starting center come August 30th against Tennessee, because that's the season opener. So likely they're going into the portal to find a center if John Ray Reed goes elsewhere. But like I said at the top, even though John Ray Reed wasn't the best center in 2024, for continuity purposes, for chemistry on the offensive line, especially if Kyle McCord and or the guards can come back, you want to have a similar unit to the unit you just had because it was a strong unit. And chemistry definitely matters on the offensive line. So hopefully John Ray Reed stays. But if not, they're probably going to go in the portal to address it because even the backup is out of eligibility. And then there is the uh-oh scenario. What's the uh-oh scenario, you ask? Well, what if nobody returns? What if John Ray Reed decides to enter the portal? What if Jakob Bradford and Mark Petry either enter the portal in the spring or they don't get that extra year of eligibility from the NCAA? Because again, it's not clear because they've been in college for already 6 years. So let's say nobody returns. Well, then you're back to square one with the offensive line in the sense that it's the biggest need besides quarterback this offseason. And since they got Ricky Collins, which is their backup plan in case that the Kyle McCord ruling doesn't go in their favor, the offensive line becomes the number one need for the Orange. Period, point blank. I think what would happen is my scenario of moving a tackle to guard will come into effect. It's those three of Woolaba, Weatherspoon, or Betrand. The other starting guard is anyone's guess. Joe Cruz was a backup this season. He's got an extra year of eligibility. There's also Josh Miller, who entered the transfer portal from Syracuse as a backup this past season, but decided to take himself out of the portal, so maybe he gets promoted. The center position is what I said in the last minute or so. You probably are going in the portal to address center if John Ray Reed is gone. This would be the least ideal scenario because the Orange would have to replace 4 of their 5 starters on the offensive line, which was a pretty good unit from this past season. The most ideal scenario is that John Ray Reed, Jakob Bradford, and Mark Petry are all back. So Syracuse's interior offensive line is the same. Their left tackle is David Willibur or Demetrius Weatherspoon, and your right tackle is likely LeQuint Allen. So those are the scenarios for the offensive line. What are your thoughts on Syracuse's offensive line outlook for next season? Leave a comment in the comment section below. I would love to hear your thoughts on the offensive line and whether or not you're concerned about it. To me, it comes down to who's coming back and who's leaving. If they all come back, not concerned one bit. If they don't come back, then I am concerned.